Yo, what's up? I'm a dev that likes to make games in his free time. Lately, I've been trying to take game dev a little more seriously, and I've decided to make an indie horror game.
Look at this dude. Stop it. Get some help.
Yeah, very original, but my idea has a twist. It's supposed to be a first-person co-op horror game. You and your friends go on a bike ride late at night. You encounter strange houses that you need to investigate in order to move forward. Or else, you'll be stuck on the same road for eternity. I actually did most of the work before I even started recording. The 3D models you see have been imported from Sketchfab or Mixamo, I don't know which one I used. I made a basic player controller for character movement and input, added a modular state machine, built a full bicycle controller with its own state machine. I also spent time building a complex network architecture that only used signals, but that kind of crumpled really fast. Now I have shifted to a simpler, more reliable setup consisting of game manager, a scene manager and a UI manager to handle game flow. I didn't want to bloat the scene tree with singletons, so for now I'm only using the UI manager and the game manager as autoloads. I created a scene manager node that acts as the root for all the scene level content. Inside that, I added a persistent multiplayer spawner for spawning multiplayers. Originally, I had a spawner per level, but that caused issues with missing paths during scene changes, which I will elaborate in the later part of the video. Understanding RPC was painful. I spent countless hours bouncing between ChatGPT and docs. FYI, this project is not being wipe coded. I use ChatGPT as a reference tool because sometimes it's used for efficient search engine. I didn't understand what a client should call, what the authority could do, what authority meant in the first place. I've done multiplayer projects in the past, but they got out of hand, so I dropped them eventually. Ultimately, I understood how things work. I started taking notes to understand how things work, just in case I forgot how things work in the future, and then I could always go back to my notes to see how things work. Anyways, this is my current understanding of how the client and server function in a multiplayer architecture, blah 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 blah. Client sees, the client asks, the server decides, and the server acts. Maybe you can understand this better with an example that I can show you. Let's say a client wants to enter its name into a text field and make it known to the rest of the players on the same server. So a client enters data into the UI element. That's my cat in the background. My girlfriend likes to mess with it. Would you please leave him alone? Client enters data in UI. UI manager emits a signal. This is like the UI asking the game server. Then the game manager, which is the server actually, listens to the signal and decides which player it needs to update and what fields are needed to be updated. And later the decision is made. It performs some functions such as register player data and then update the player data for the rest of the peers on the same server. Later that, everybody can see the reflected changes in the list box or whatever that UI panel is. And in that way, the whole cycle continues again until a new request is asked from the client. I originally tried using the get tree and change scene method for transitioning between scenes, but that approach kept breaking important multiplayer references, especially the multiplayer spawner. Every time a scene changed, some nodes like the spawner would go missing, leading to null instance references and broken synchronization. To fix this, I introduced a persistent scene manager node that stays in the tree throughout the game. Now, instead of switching scenes the traditional way, I load new scenes as children under a node called scene tree inside the scene manager. This gives me full control over what gets loaded and unloaded, and it makes sure that key multiplayer systems like the spawner remains intact and functional. Now we come to spawning players. Spawning players was a pain. It usually gave me trouble with player authority, or sometimes the other player wouldn't load at all. I found a Reddit post by Battery Acid Dev, Bad Multiplayer, I believe he has a plugin online, that helped a lot. Instead of spawning players manually, I wrote a custom spawn function inside the scene manager to assign authority. Now I don't even need to use add child for every player, the multiplayer spawner handles it on its own. Then I move to the most crucial part, is mounting and dismounting the player on and off the bicycle. Both players and bikes already had their own multiplayer synchronizers and state machines. So all I needed was to make sure it works over the network. Thankfully, my earlier understanding of RPC flow helped in this. I applied the same logic I mentioned before based on the client server diagram. The logic was quite simple. The client would see a bike, the player would ask the server to mount itself on the bike. The server would check if the bike is free to be mounted on and if the player owns the bike. I will touch upon that a little later. If yes, it mounts the player on the bike and everybody sees the player being mounted on the bike. Now, I use the same thing for dismounting, but in the reverse order, you would know what I mean. So what I do is I spawn both players and their bicycles with the same authority right from the start. That's because trying to assign or transfer authority at runtime was causing errors. In some cases, a player wouldn't have authority over anything at all. Keeping the authority consistent during spawn avoids those issues. We have one limitation with this approach is that each player is tied to one specific bike with matching authority. So we can't swap bikes if we try to do that in game. That might be a problem for later, but for now I believe it's fine because I don't really have any function in my game planned where you would have to steal or swap your bikes. Well, that's it for this devlog. For the next one, I'm planning to have an enemy AI with some basic states such as idle, alert, and cheese, and it should react to any player on the server despite what their authority is. That's all for now. See you next time. Bye bye.